A man named Daniel spent nearly a decade doing everything the financial world told him to do. Every extra dollar went into investments. Every bonus was invested. Every raise was invested. He felt responsible, disciplined, financially intelligent. Then something unexpected happened. A small business owner in his city decided to retire and sell a company that had quietly generated consistent profits for over 20 years. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a tech startup. It wasn't the next big thing. But it was available at a price far below what it was worth. Daniel immediately recognized the opportunity. There's only one problem. He had no cash. His wealth existed almost entirely on paper. His money was tied up in investments that had fallen nearly 25% during a market downturn. Selling meant locking in losses. So he watched someone else buy the business. 5 years later, that business was worth several times the original purchase price. Daniel wasn't poor. He wasn't financially irresponsible. He simply lacked something that many people underestimate: liquidity, cash. The financial asset that often gets dismissed as doing nothing. When people talk about building wealth, cash rarely receives much attention. The conversation usually revolves around stocks, real estate, businesses, cryptocurrencies, and investments that promise growth. Cash is often portrayed as the boring asset, the lazy asset, the asset that inflation slowly destroys. And while there is truth in that criticism, it tells only half the story. Because cash isn't merely an investment. Cash is an option. And options have value. The real power of holding cash has very little to do with interest rates, savings accounts, or short-term returns. Its power comes from flexibility. Its power comes from timing. Its power comes from being able to act while everyone else is forced to wait. What most people don't realize is that wealth is not only created by what you own, it is also created by what you are able to do when opportunities appear. And cash dramatically changes what you are able to do. Throughout history, periods of extreme wealth creation often emerged during moments of uncertainty, during recessions, during market crashes, during financial panics, during periods when asset prices became disconnected from reality. The challenge is that opportunities rarely arrive when people feel comfortable. They usually arrive when people feel afraid. And fear creates a strange financial paradox. When opportunities become abundant, liquidity becomes scarce. People who thought they were wealthy suddenly discover that most of their wealth is trapped. Investments fall. Property becomes difficult to sell. Businesses struggle. Credit tightens. Banks become cautious. At exactly the moment when incredible opportunities appear, many people lose the ability to take advantage of them. This is where cash changes everything. Warren Buffett once described cash as oxygen. You don't notice it when it's abundant, but when it's gone, it becomes the only thing that matters. Think about how most people approach personal finance. They are taught to maximize efficiency, invest every dollar, keep money working, avoid idle cash, optimize every percentage point of return. On the surface, this sounds logical. After all, if cash earns less than investments over long periods, shouldn't you minimize cash holdings? Not necessarily, because life is not a spreadsheet. Life is unpredictable. And unpredictability creates value for liquidity. Imagine two investors. Both have a net worth of $500,000. The first investor has every dollar invested. The second investor has $400,000 invested and $100,000 in cash. On paper, the first investor appears more efficient, more optimized, more committed to growth. But now imagine a severe recession arrives. Asset prices decline sharply. Businesses struggle. Real estate weakens. Panic spreads. Suddenly, the second investor possesses something extremely valuable: choice. The first investor can only react. The second investor can act. That difference may sound subtle, but over decades, it can become enormous. Behavioral finance research repeatedly shows that human beings make poor decisions under stress. When people feel trapped, they become emotional. When they lack options, they become desperate. And desperation rarely produces good financial outcomes. Cash reduces desperation. It creates psychological breathing room. That breathing room is often worth far more than the return sacrificed by holding cash. One of the most overlooked benefits of cash is that it improves decision-making. Most people think of cash purely as a financial asset. In reality, it is also an emotional asset. When someone has adequate cash reserves, they negotiate differently. They invest differently. They think differently. They take calculated risks rather than reckless risks. They can walk away from bad opportunities. They can wait patiently. They can remain rational while others panic. This is where things become interesting. Many of the wealthiest individuals in history did not become wealthy simply because they earned high returns. They became wealthy because they maintained the ability to deploy capital when conditions became favorable. The public often focuses on the purchase, but the purchase was only possible because liquidity existed beforehand. People see the winning investment. They rarely see the years of preparation that made the investment possible. This reveals an important truth about wealth. Opportunities are rarely scheduled. They appear unexpectedly. The perfect stock does not send an invitation 6 months in advance. The perfect property does not wait until your next paycheck. The perfect business acquisition does not align itself with your financial plans. Opportunities emerge suddenly. Cash allows you to respond suddenly. Without cash, even brilliant opportunities can become meaningless. Consider another dimension that almost nobody discusses. Holding cash gives you the power of patience. The modern financial world constantly encourages action. Buy something, sell something, invest somewhere, upgrade something, do something. But some of the most profitable decisions in finance involve waiting. Waiting requires patience. Patience requires confidence, and confidence often requires liquidity. An investor who desperately needs returns next month behaves differently from an investor who can comfortably wait several years. The first investor is pressured. The second investor is positioned. Pressure creates mistakes. Positioning creates opportunities. This distinction becomes especially important during periods of economic uncertainty. When markets become volatile, many investors discover they were taking more risk than they realized. Assets they believed were stable suddenly fluctuate dramatically. Income streams become uncertain. Debt becomes heavier. Expenses remain unchanged. At that moment, cash stops looking boring. It starts looking powerful. Because cash performs a unique role that no other asset performs. Cash gives you certainty. Its purchasing power may gradually decline over long periods due to inflation, but its nominal value remains stable. $1 today is still $1 tomorrow. That certainty creates optionality, and optionality is one of the most valuable concepts in wealth building. Optionality means maintaining the ability to choose among multiple future paths. The future is uncertain. Nobody knows exactly what opportunities will emerge. Nobody knows which industries will boom. Nobody knows which investments will disappoint. Nobody knows what personal circumstances will arise. Cash provides flexibility across all of those unknowns. In many ways, cash acts like a bridge between today's uncertainty and tomorrow's opportunity. The mistake many people make is viewing cash and investments as enemies. They assume the decision is either invest everything or hold everything. But wealth building rarely succeeds through extremes. Successful financial strategies tend to balance growth with resilience. Growth creates wealth. Resilience preserves opportunity. You need both. Imagine planting a garden. You could use every available seed immediately. That might maximize short-term planting. But what happens if weather conditions suddenly change? What happens if a better plot of land becomes available? What happens if new information emerges? Keeping some seeds in reserve may appear inefficient until circumstances change. Then the reserve becomes incredibly valuable. Cash functions similarly. It may appear inactive, yet its value often emerges precisely when circumstances shift. This is why many sophisticated investors think differently about cash than beginners. Beginners often focus exclusively on return. Experienced investors often focus on flexibility. Return matters, but flexibility matters too, and flexibility frequently produces returns that are impossible to predict in advance. Another reason cash matters is that it protects against forced selling. This concept deserves more attention because it quietly destroys wealth for millions of people. Imagine someone owns excellent investments, strong businesses, quality assets, long-term potential. Everything is working exactly as planned. Then an emergency occurs. Medical expenses, job loss, family obligations, unexpected repairs. Suddenly they need money. If no cash exists, investments must be sold, not because selling is wise, because selling becomes necessary. The difference between voluntary selling and forced selling is enormous. Voluntary selling happens on your terms. Forced selling happens on reality's terms. And reality rarely negotiates. Cash reduces the probability of forced selling. It allows long-term investments to remain long-term investments. It protects the strategy from being interrupted by life's unpredictability. This is one reason financial advisors often emphasize emergency funds before investing aggressively. The goal isn't maximizing returns. The goal is protecting future decisions, because once a person is forced into survival mode, long-term wealth building becomes much harder. The data reveals something fascinating about financial stress. Research consistently shows that financial insecurity affects more than money. It affects concentration, decision-making, mental health, relationships, productivity. The absence of liquidity creates pressure that extends far beyond investing. This means cash often generates returns that never appear on a financial statement. Better sleep, lower stress, improved decision-making, greater confidence, more freedom. These benefits are difficult to measure, but they are very real. Of course, this does not mean cash should dominate your portfolio forever. Holding excessive amounts of cash for decades can become costly. Inflation slowly erodes purchasing power. Productive assets generally outperform cash over long periods. Businesses create profits. Stocks participate in economic growth. Real estate can generate income. Cash typically does not. The goal is not to worship cash. The goal is to understand its purpose, and its purpose is often misunderstood. Cash is not primarily a wealth-building asset. Cash is a wealth-enabling asset. It creates conditions that make wealth building easier. It increases your ability to survive uncertainty. It increases your ability to seize opportunity. It increases your ability to remain patient. These advantages may not show up immediately, but over decades, they can become remarkably powerful. Think about the people who emerged stronger after major economic downturns. Many shared one characteristic. They had resources available when resources became scarce. They were not scrambling for liquidity. They possessed liquidity, and that difference changed everything. The irony is that cash often feels least useful right before it becomes most useful. During booming markets, cash appears foolish. Everyone else seems to be making money faster. Asset prices rise. Confidence rises. Optimism rises. Cash appears unnecessary. But financial history repeatedly shows that periods of extreme optimism eventually give way to uncertainty. And when uncertainty arrives, liquidity suddenly becomes valuable again. This cycle has repeated for generations. The details change. The principle does not. The people who maintain flexibility often navigate uncertainty better than those who maximize efficiency at all costs. There is another lesson hidden here. Wealth is not merely the accumulation of assets. True wealth is the accumulation of options. The ability to choose where you work. The ability to choose where you live. The ability to choose how you spend your time. The ability to choose which opportunities to pursue. Cash strengthens all of those options. It expands the range of possible futures available to you. That expansion carries value, sometimes enormous value. The real power of holding cash isn't found in a savings account statement. It isn't found in an interest rate. It isn't found in a monthly return. Its power lies in what it allows you to do when circumstances change. And circumstances always change. Markets change. Careers change. Economies change. Families change. Opportunities change. Life changes. The people who thrive financially are not always the people who predict these changes perfectly. Often, they are the people who remain prepared for them. Preparation rarely feels exciting. It rarely generates headlines. It rarely impresses others, but it creates something far more important: readiness. And readiness is one of the most underrated forms of wealth, because when the next opportunity appears, the question won't be whether the opportunity exists. The question will be whether you're in a position to act. That is the real power of holding cash. Not because cash makes you rich by itself, but because it gives you the freedom, patience, and flexibility to become rich when the right moment finally arrives.